Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about Moira Buffini's play Handbagged. Now, this is a history play of sorts, but it's concerned with recent history. The reign of Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister of Great Britain, starting in 1979 and going up into the 80s. Primarily, the focus is Thatcher's relationship to Queen Elizabeth II, who was and is the reigning monarch of the UK at time of filming. It's an interesting play because a lot of stuff is going on. And for me, there's two major elements that are really, really interesting. One is this kind of attempt to understand Thatcher as a personality, and the other is the Brechtian elements of this. Now, Bertolt Brecht is a very, very, very significant theater theorist of the mid-20th century. He came up with an idea called epic theater, which is basically driven by the Verfremdungseffekt, or the, it's often translated into English as the alienation effect, or the distancing effect. Basically, what the idea is that actors and performances break up the illusion of seeing actual real-life events. So traditionally, if you go back to, say, the 18th century, the early 19th century, with the tradition of the well-made play, even if you go into the modernist tradition of people like Ibsen and Shaw, Chekhov, people like this, in principle, you should be able to watch these plays and imagine that you're actually seeing real-life events play out. Brecht, along with a number of other people in the mid-20th century, comes along and says, no, stop that. What we should be doing is signaling to the audience that what they are seeing is constructed. That this is an artistic experience that has a message they should be getting, and they should be applying this message to their own lives and experiences. And in the case of Handbagged, that message is largely a political one, but it's a complicated political one. So I'm going to talk about those two elements of it, Thatcher's politics as reflected in the play and the Brechtian elements. So even from before the beginning, and I'm going to start with the Brechtian elements, because again, I think this is a good setup for understanding this play's political agenda and the complexity of its political agenda. So even from before the first word of the play, in the character list, we have complexity and we have distinction, because we have two actors, playing Margaret Thatcher and two actors playing Queen Elizabeth II. We have the character called T, who's an older Margaret Thatcher, and the character called Q, who's an older Queen Elizabeth II. Then we have Mags, who's a younger Margaret Thatcher, and Liz, who's a younger Queen Elizabeth II. But then we also have two actors who are just listed as Actor 1 and Actor 2, but they play a number of different parts, and that's not unusual whatsoever. And actually, even having one actor playing an older version of a character and another actor playing a younger version is not that unusual, but the fact that T and Mags interact, and Q and Liz interact, is extremely unusual for this. Usually when you have a younger character or an older character, it's either a flashback or a flash forward scene. Here, these characters disagree about what actually happened at various points in Thatcher and Elizabeth's relationship. So that's one of the immediate Brechtian elements. There's no way we could potentially embrace illusion that we're seeing a younger and older Margaret Thatcher disagreeing about what actually happens here. But we've also got some more, we've also got some very overt Brechtian elements, places where the characters draw direct attention to themselves. And the first time we get this is when actor 1, who's playing a palace footman, comes on and says, "I am a palace footman, and I'll be leading the Prime Minister silently and respectfully to Her Majesty the Queen." There's a couple of other lines, and then he says, "I am a functionary whose purpose is to serve. To do my job well is to be unnoticed. You may be interested to know that I have a city and guilds diploma in butlering, and that the royal household is committed to equality of opportunity." Then Q, that's older Queen Elizabeth, says, "Thank you for mentioning that. We're quite modern, you see." So this is an overtly Brechtian technique where a character comes on and says, "I am X person, here is my purpose, here is my social context." That's a very, very much an alienating or distancing effect in performance, because nobody in real life does that. Like you wouldn't, like, yeah, you meet somebody and they introduce themselves and say, here's the job that I do or whatever it is. But in a play, you don't, right? And it is an artificial construct. Like the fact that the footman doesn't need to speak at all. The footman can just show Thatcher to the Queen. That's all he needs to do. That's his role. But the fact that he takes the time out to say, "I am a footman, this is what I do," draws our attention to him. So we've got that element. We also have actual transitions between the doubled characters that actors 1 and 2 play. Later on, actor 2 changes his glasses to go from being Dennis Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's husband, to Peter Carrington, Foreign Secretary. And T has an argument with him about this. Basically, she says, "But you're Dennis. I need you to be Dennis. You can't be Peter Carrington if you're Dennis." And T at some point says, "Are you Dennis or not?" And actor 2 says, "No, I'm not." T says, "How dare you? How dare you attempt to impersonate him?" T exits, and then actor 2 says, "Look, I'm playing several roles here. I mean, some of them have got only one line and others are horrible, thin caricatures, but times are hard and it's a job. I don't want to offend anybody, all right? I am currently Foreign Secretary and Minister for Overseas Development, Peter Carrington." So again, we're drawing direct attention to the way that this play is constructed. And then the last Brechtian element, the last one that I want to draw your attention to, actually transitions us to the question of politics, because by this point we've made it to about midway through Thatcher's career, maybe 85, 86, something like that. Her career as Prime Minister, not her entire career, but midway through her tenure as PM. Actor 1 is especially upset about all of the omissions that the play is making, because it is largely depicting Thatcher's tenure from the perspective of Margaret Thatcher and Queen Elizabeth II. But what's being left out is real, accurate discussion of things like the miners' strike, race riots in the middle of Thatcher's tenure, the devastating effects of her evisceration of the social safety net, which massively increased poverty. And that does come up a number of times, and I'll talk more about that. But actor 2 is like, I just feel there's some massive omissions here. The huge job losses, unemployment leapt by 1 million in 1 year, the unrest in Northern Ireland, the hunger strikes. Actor 2 says, "Look, it's not our gig, okay?" Actor 1 says, "I'm just saying that if you miss out the riots and all the unrest, people, like younger people, might think nothing else happened in 1981 apart from the royal wedding and Bucks Fizz winning the Eurovision." Actor 2 says, "How did you know about Bucks Fizz?" Actor 1 says, "My research. I wikied the 80s," which is just a great line. And actor 2 asks, you wikied the 80s? So again, Moira Buffini is consistently an absolutely hilarious playwright, and I love her work, and that's one of those great moments of just, it's small and it's funny. But this section also brings up a major, major point, which is that Thatcher had a detrimental effect on the quality of life of the average person living in the UK, and arguably of the average person living in the world. She believed unquestioningly and continually that she was absolutely right about everything, and she was unwilling to compromise in almost any situation. And that's part of what made her so detrimental. I think I forgot to give this disclaimer at the beginning. I have a huge problem with Margaret Thatcher. I think she is probably the greatest villain of post-World War II British history, in my opinion. I cannot talk about her objectively. I cannot talk about her charitably. That's worth noting as I move into this second portion of the video, because her politics were so reprehensible to me and so detrimental. And it was a matter almost of complete indifference to her. And I find that repugnant. So the thing is, we get a great indication of Thatcher's ideology and her character right from her opening speech. She says, freedom. Freedom and democracy. They are things worth dying for. Now, it is worth noting what Thatcher means by freedom and democracy is very specific here. What she means essentially is the right of the wealthy to do what they want without any responsibility to anyone else in society. Freedom. Freedom and democracy. They are things worth dying for. We must never, never stop resisting those who would take them from us, and when they have been taken, we will fight until we get them back. The act of resistance is our defining act as human beings. To say, no, I will not stand for that. I will not collude, collaborate, negotiate. I will not compromise. To the enemies of freedom, you are wrong. To resist, whatever the cost. To say, no, this is courage. This is integrity. I would be proud if this word defined me. No. And then she switches gears here. I'd like a chair, but I don't need one. But I'd like one. I will not ask for one. If I wait, they will notice. They will bring me one. One of the men, dancing around me in their suits, ties flapping in the wind, holding their documents like babies. The men. I could pin them wriggling with my gaze and then release them with a smile. I like to do it. Girlish. I was girlish. At which point, the elderly Queen Elizabeth brings on a chair, offers it to Thatcher, who refuses it out of principle. And then we get a brief introduction to the Queen's character and ideology. She says, we conceive parliamentary institutions with their free speech and respect for the rights of minorities to be a precious part of our way of life and outlook. They inspire a broad tolerance in thought and expression. During recent centuries, this message has been sustained and invigorated by the immense contribution in language, literature, and action of the nations of our Commonwealth overseas. Our Commonwealth gives expression, as I pray it always will, to living principles as sacred to the crown and monarchy as it is to many parliaments and peoples. I ask you now to cherish them, and practice them too. Then we can go forward together in peace, seeking justice and freedom for all men. At which point Thatcher invites Elizabeth to sit down, and Elizabeth says, no thank you. So that's what we get here. We get these competing ideologies. Thatcher is absolutely committed to a very, very specific and limited version of freedom. That freedom being Again, an economic freedom, a version of free market fundamentalism, in which she absolutely asserts and maintains, regardless of any evidence to the contrary, that deregulation, market freedom, allowing the wealthy to do what they want with their wealth without any constraints is the best way to grow the economy and to benefit everybody. And that was one of Thatcher's central ideological contentions, and she maintained that dogmatically. One of the problems is that it does not work. It never works. The US has the wealth and income inequality gaps that we have today because Reagan did that same ideology in the 80s, and it was carried through into the 90s with Bush and Bill Clinton. And then with Bush too, into the 2000s. The UK has the wealth and income inequality issues it has today because of Thatcher and John Major and Tony Blair. We know this. We have seen this empirically over and over and over. When you deregulate capitalism and let the wealthy accumulate wealth, trickle-down economics means that the wealthy get wealthy and the poor get poor. That's just how it is, and the data is there. And Thatcher did not give a shit. She did not care at all. And we see that in this play. So at one point, Actor 2 is challenging her over the miners' strike. Because in, I think, 1984, I think 84 is when the miners' strike started, Thatcher wanted to close a number of mines. She claimed that they were unproductive mines. The miners, especially in Wales, said, we need these mines because there is no other form of income in our communities. And Thatcher said, too bad. The mines are not making profit, so they should be closed. And there was a big strike. There was a miners' strike. So Actor 2 says, in 1983, Britain had 170 deep coal mines. Now there's one. Mag says, it's simply bad housekeeping to keep unprofitable pits open. Actor 2 says, whole communities lost their work. It was a tragedy. It was heartbreaking. T says, who said that? Actor 2 says, no one important. T says, is that your own private opinion? Mag says, it is. It's his own opinion. Would you tell me whose opinion these people have paid good money to hear? And Actor 2 says, Her Majesty's opinion. T says, and? Actor 2 says, and your opinion. T says, what does your opinion count for here? Mag says, what does your opinion count for? Actor 2 says, it destroyed more than people's livelihoods. It destroyed the whole idea of the dignity of labor. Mag says, have these people paid to hear that? Actor 2 says, no. T says, then what does it count for? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. And Actor 2 says, nothing. This is enacting Thatcher's utter indifference to the actual suffering of people. She did not care. She simply didn't care. It's hard to emphasize that sufficiently. She believed absolutely that if the wealthy got as much money as they could, that A, that was best for society, and B, that everyone as a whole would become prosperous. And when that didn't happen, when the exact opposite of that happened, she stuck to her ideological principle, regardless of the fact that the outcome was detrimental to massive numbers of people in the UK. We see the same thing. She resisted apartheid. She resisted the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against apartheid in South Africa. She insisted that white South Africans, that the nationalist government running apartheid was right. And everybody else in the world almost said, this is abhorrent. This is a repugnant system. But Thatcher said, because the nationalist government is capitalist, it does not matter if people are suffering. The ANC are Marxists. They must not be allowed to get power, even if they would improve the lives of the average person. And indeed they did. Not as much as they should have or could have, but that's the thing about Thatcher that I just find reprehensible, is this complete indifference to the actual suffering of people caused by her policies. And we get that very, very distinctly multiple times in Handbagged.